Hi. Sorry I've missed you guys all week. Like I said, Bender had surgery, he got neutered, so those two dogs have been a hot mess. Last time we saw Christopher, he outsmarted the policeman who had gotten on the train who said his father was looking for him, and he hid on a shelf right outside the bathroom behind a suitcase, and that's where we are, okay? I wondered whether I should get off the train because it had just stopped at London, and I was scared because if the train went anywhere else, it would be somewhere where I didn't know anybody. And then somebody went to the toilet and then came out again, but they didn't see me. But I could smell their poop, and it was different from the smell of the poop that I smelled in the toilet when I was in there. I closed my eyes and did some more math puzzles so I didn't think about where I was going. The train stopped again, and I thought about getting off the shelf and going to get my bag and get off the train. But I didn't want to be found by the policeman or to be taken to father, so I stayed on the shelf and didn't move, and no one saw me this time. I had been looking at my watch since the train had started at 12:59 p.m., and the first stop had been at 1:16 p.m., which was 17 minutes later, and it was now 1:39 p.m., which was 23 minutes after the stop, which means that we would be at the sea if the train didn't go in a big curve, but I didn't know if it went in a big curve. And then there were another four stops, and four people came and took bags off the shelves, and two people put bags on the shelves, but no one moved the big suitcase that was in front of me. And only one person saw me, and they said, "You're fucking weird, mate." And that was a man in a suit. And six people went to the toilet, but they didn't poop, at least what I could smell, which was a good thing. And then the train stopped, and a lady with a yellow watering coat came near me and took the big suitcase away, and she said, "Were you touching this? Have you touched this?" "Yes." And then she just went away. And then a man stood next to the shelf and said, "Come and look at this, Barry. They've got like a train elf or something." "Well, we've both been drinking," said the other man. "Perhaps we should feed him some nuts." "You're the one who's bloody nuts." "Come on, shift it. I need more beers before I sober up." And then they went away. The train was really quiet and it didn't move again, and I couldn't hear anyone. So I decided to get off the shelf and go and get my bag and see if the policeman was still in the seat. So I got off the shelf and I looked through the door. But the policeman wasn't there. And my bag was gone as well, which had Toby's food in it, my math books, clean pants, a vest, a shirt, orange juice, and the milk and the custard creams and the baked beans. And then I heard the sound of feet, and I turned around, and it was another policeman. Not the one who was on the train before, and I could see him through the door in the next carriage. He was looking under the seats. And I decided that I didn't like policemen so much anymore, so I got off the train. And when I saw how big the room was that the train was in, and I heard how noisy and echoey it was, I had to kneel down on the ground for a bit because I thought I was going to fall over. And when I was kneeling on the ground, I worked out which way to walk. And I decided to walk in the direction that the train was going when it came from the station, because if this was the last stop, that was the direction London was in. So I stood up and I imagined that there was a big red line on the ground which ran parallel to the train to the gate at the far end, and I walked along it and said, "Left, right, left, right." And when I got to the gate, a man said to me, "I think somebody's looking for you, Sonny." "Who's looking for me?" Because I thought it might be Mother, and the policeman in Swindon had phoned her up with the phone number I told him. "A policeman." "I know." "Oh, right." And then he said, "You wait here then, I'll go and tell him," and he walked back onto the side of the train. So I carried on walking, and I could still feel the feeling like a balloon inside my chest, and it hurt, and I covered my ears with my hands, and I went and stood against the wall of a little shop, which said Hotel and Theater Reservations, telephone number, tells you the telephone number, in the middle of the big room, and then I took my hands away from my ears, and I groaned to block out the noise, and I looked around in all the signs that were in London. It's just a bunch of different signs. But after a few seconds, they look like this. They're in a different language. Because there were too many and my brain wasn't working properly. And this frightened me, so I closed my eyes again and I counted slowly to 50 without doing the cubes. And I stood there and I opened my Swiss Army knife in my pocket to make me feel safe, and I held on to it tight. And then I made my hand into a little tube with my fingers, and I opened my eyes and I looked through the tube so that I was only looking at one side at a time. And after a long time, I saw the sign that said Information, and it was a window on a little shop. And a man came up to me, and he was wearing a blue jacket and blue trousers, and he had brown shoes, and he was carrying a book in his hand and said, "You look lost." So I took out my Swiss Army knife. "Whoa, whoa, whoa, whoa." And he held up both his hands with his fingers stretched out on a fan. Like he wanted me to stretch my fingers out in a fan and touch his fingers, because he wanted to say that he loved me. But he did it with both hands, not like Mother and Father did with just one. And then he walked away backwards. So I went to the shop that said Information, and I could feel my heart beating very hard, and I could hear a noise like the sea in my ears. And when I got to the window, I said, "Is this London?" But there was no one behind the window. And then someone sat behind the window, and she was a lady, and she was black, and she had long fingernails which were painted pink, and I asked again, "Is this London?" "Sure is, honey." "Is this London?" Indeed it is. How do I get to 451C Chapter Road, London, Northwest 2? And she said, where is that? And I said, it's 451C Chapter Road, London, and Northwest 2. And sometimes you can write it 451C Chapter Road, Willesden, London, Northwest 2. The lady said to me, take the tube to Willesden Junction, honey, or Willesden Green. Got to be near there somewhere. What sort of tube? Are you for real? I didn't say anything. Over there. See that big suitcase with the escalators? See the sign? Says Underground. Take the Bakerloo line to Willesden Junction, or the Jubilee to Willesden Green. You okay, honey? And I looked where she was pointing, and there was a big staircase going down to the ground, and there was a big sign over it that said, Underground. I thought, I can do this, because I was doing really well and I was in London, and I would find my mother. And I had to think to myself, the people are like cows in the field, and I just had to look in front of me all the time and make a red line along the floor of the picture of the big room in my head and follow it. And I walked across the big room to the escalators, and I kept a hold of my Swiss Army knife in my pocket, and I held on to Toby in the other pocket to make sure he didn't escape. And the escalators was a staircase, but it was moving, and people stepped onto it, and it carried them down and up, and it made me laugh because I hadn't been on one before, and it was like something in a science fiction film about the future, but I didn't want to use it, so I went down the stairs instead. And then I went into a smaller room underground, and there were lots of people, and there were pillars which had blue lights in the ground, above and below them, and I like these, because I don't like people, so I saw a photo booth like one that I went into March 25th, 1994, to have my passport photo done. And I went into the photo booth because it was like a cupboard, and it felt safe, and I could look out through the curtain. And I did detecting by watching it, and I saw that people were putting tickets into gray gates and walking through. And some of them were buying tickets at big black machines on the wall. I watched 47 people do this, and I memorized what to do. Then I imagined a red line on the floor, and I walked over to the wall where there was a poster, which was a list of places to go, and it was alphabetical, and I saw Willesden Green, and it said 220. And then I went to one of the machines, and there was a little green which said, press ticket type. And I pressed the button that most people had pressed, which was adult single. And 220 came up on the screen. Insert 220. I put $1 coins into the slot, and there was a clinking noise, and the screen said, take ticket and change. And there was a ticket in a little hole at the bottom of the machine, and 50 cents left. I put the coins in my pocket, and I went up to one of the great gates. And I put my ticket into the slot, and it sucked it in, and it came out the other side of the gate. Someone said, get a move on, and I made the noise like a dog barking, and I walked forward, and the gate opened this time. I took my ticket like other people did, and I liked the gray gate because that was something in a science fiction film too. And then I had to work out which way to go. So I stood against a wall so people didn't touch me, and there was a sign for Bakerloo line and District and Circle line, but not one for Jubilee line like the lady had said. So I made a plan, and it was go to Willesden Junction to the Bakerloo line. I read all the words on the sign, and I found Willesden Junction, so I followed the arrow that said left, and I went through the left-hand tunnel, and there was a fence down the middle of the tunnel, and the people were walking straight ahead on the left and coming the other way on the right like a road. So I walked along the left, and the tunnel curved left. Ooh, alarm, hold on. Sorry, my alarm. And it pointed down an escalator, so I had to go down the escalators, and I had to hold on to the rubber rail. But that moved too, so I didn't fall over, and people were standing close to me, and I wanted to hit them to make them go away, but I didn't hit them because of the caution. And then I was at the bottom of the escalators, and I had to jump off, and I tripped and bumped into someone, and they said, easy there, boy. And there were two ways to go. One said northbound, and I went that way because Willesden was on the top half of the map, and the top is always north on maps. And then I was in another train station, but it was dirty, and it was a tunnel, and there were only one track, and the walls were curved, and they were covered in big advertisements. There were lots of people standing in the little station, and it was underground, so there weren't any windows, and I didn't like that. So I found a seat, which was a bench, and I sat at the end of the bench. And then lots of people started coming into the little station, and someone sat down on the other end of the bench, and it was a lady who had a black briefcase and purple shoes and a brooch shaped like a parrot. And then the people came into the little station so that it was even more crowded. I couldn't see the walls anymore, and the back of someone's jacket touched my knees, and I felt sick, and I started groaning really loudly. And the lady on the bench stood up, and no one else sat down. And I felt like I felt when I had the flu, and I had to stay in bed all day, and all of me hurt, and I couldn't walk or eat or go to sleep or do math. And then there was a sound like people fighting with swords, and I could feel a strong wind, and a roaring started. I closed my eyes and the roaring got louder, and I groaned really loudly, but I couldn't block it out of my ears, and I thought the little station was going to collapse, or that there was a big fire somewhere and I was going to die. And then the roaring turned into a clattering and squealing, and it got slowly quieter, and then it stopped, and I kept my eyes closed, because I felt safer not seeing what was happening. And then I could hear people moving again because it was quieter, and I opened my eyes because I couldn't see anything at first. There were too many people. And then I saw that they were getting onto a train that wasn't there before, and it was the train which was the roaring, and there was sweat running down my face from under my hair, and I was moaning, not groaning, but different, like a dog when it hurts its paw. And I heard that sound, but I didn't realize it was me at first. And then on the train, the doors closed and the train started moving, and it roared again, but not as loud this time. And 5 carriages went past, and it went into a tunnel at the end of the little station, and it was quiet again. The people were all walking into the tunnels that went out of the station. And I was shaking and I wanted to be back home. And then I realized I couldn't be at home because Father was there, and he told a lie, and he killed Wellington, which meant that it wasn't my home anymore. My home was 451C, Chapter Road, London. And it scared me having a wrong thought like, I wish I was back at home again, because it meant my mind wasn't working properly. And then more people came into the little station and became full again. The roaring began again, and I closed my eyes, and I sweated, and I felt sick, and I felt the feeling like a balloon inside my chest. It was so big I found it hard to breathe. And then the people went away on the train, and the little station was empty again. And then it filled up with people, and another train came with the same roaring. And it was exactly like having flu that time, because I wanted it to stop. Like, can you just pull the plug out of a computer of the wall if it crashes? Because I wanted to go to sleep so that I wouldn't have to rethink about this. I just wanted to sit there, and there was nothing to do except to wait and to hurt. Alright, we're going to stop right there. Today's going to be easy day. It's going to be makeup work day. Remember, you need to get some work in if you want to not fail my class this thing. Alright, love you guys. See you next week.